In the village of Obibi, it was forbidden for an unmarried man and woman to sleep together under the same roof. But Ibeh, blinded by his desires, broke the law. Ibeh had committed a great abomination just to have Obiageli, a young beautiful damsel from the tribe of Beauty. That day marked the beginning of Ibeh's destruction. His father called Ibeh and said, "My son, be ready for the doom that follows an adulterous woman. The sin of such a woman never dies. Unless a person from such a cursed family turns to his ancestors and begs for help to live nobly, he will never have peace. He will never have a good wife or raise worthy children." The question still remains, did Ibeh listen to his father, or did he choose his own destruction by himself? Let's dive in. In the 1960s, in the Obibi community of eastern Nigeria, there was a powerful king who made sure the people followed their customs and traditions. According to their beliefs, it was an abomination for an unmarried woman to become pregnant. If this happened, she would be disgraced before the whole village. No man would pay a bride price for her, and she was sent out of the village, never to return. She was seen as a woman without honor, used without respect. This was done to warn other women not to make the same mistake. The parents of such a woman were not allowed to sit with the respected people of the land. Dressing in an indecent way was not accepted, and anyone who disrespected an elder was punished. The person could be made to sweep the market for 2 full moons or work on the king's farm for 7 market days. As the elders say, a community without a leader has no morals. The Obibi community was highly respected because of its strong leadership and values. Young women dressed modestly, and young men remained pure until they were ready to marry. A man had to properly marry a woman before being with her. Women were expected to marry as virgins because having sex before marriage was seen as a great shame. If a man found out after marriage that his wife was not a virgin, he would return her the next morning. She would then be made to dance to the drum of shame and remain unmarried for the rest of her life. Because of this, the women of Obibi remained pure, no matter the challenges, to avoid the harsh traditions of the land. In the Obibi community, there was a man named Ibeh, known as the most unfortunate man in the land. He was the only man who married a wife from outside Obibi, and that decision brought him nothing but trouble, sorrow, and doom. The elders always said, "If you want to live long, do not marry a beautiful wife." But Ibeh did not listen. His wife came from Dikiri, a community known for having no good leadership. Their king was not a noble man. He slept with widows, took people's farmlands, and even killed some men to take their wives. Because of this, both the young and old in Dikiri lived without morals, and their leader was no different from them. In the Dikiri community, there was a family known as the tribe of Beauty. They were specially blessed with good looks. Their women were tall, curvy, and had the true shape of an African woman. But they were known as women of loose virtue. Many men, both young and old, gave away their farmlands, bushmeat, palm wine, and farm produce just to be with these women. Even married men left their wives to chase after them, causing fights and trouble in many homes. The women of the tribe of Beauty were often unmarried, and some would get pregnant and move in with men without a proper marriage. One day, when Ibeh was 23 years old, he traveled to his mother's village. On his way back, as he passed through into Kiri, he saw a woman so beautiful that something strange happened to him. His body changed, and he felt as if fate had taken control. She carried a water pot and was walking out of the bush path leading to the stream. As soon as Ibeh saw her, the small sack of clothes in his hand slipped, and he could not pick it up again. Her name was Obiageli, the youngest daughter from the tribe of Beauty. The women of her family were known for their big waists and full chests, said to be as round as pumpkins, making them the most admired women in the land. Obiageli was just like them. Ibeh, who had lived all his life in Obibi, had never seen such a woman before. At that moment, he decided that even if Obiageli was already married, he would go against the traditions of the land and offer to be her second husband. But if only the gods or his ancestors had been kind, they would have warned him that the beauty he saw would lead to his downfall. Ibeh stood and spoke to Obiageli. She was easy to talk to, and he did not have to struggle to win her attention. When Ibeh got home, he told his father that he had found the woman he wanted to marry. His father, Didi Anazi, was happy at first, but when Ibeh mentioned that she was from the tribe of beauty, his father's face darkened. He shook his head and said, "Over my dead body will my son marry from that cursed tribe." But Ibeh, blinded by the shape and beauty of Obiageli, swore that only death would stop him from marrying her. His father, a wise man, tried to make him understand that beauty fades, but a woman's character and values stay with her forever, even in death. Yet, no words could erase from Ibeh's mind the figure he had seen in Dikiri. Seeing that his son would not listen, Didi Anazi reported him to the family elders. When the elders gathered, Ibeh stood up without even greeting them, a great sign of disrespect. Then, in a loud voice, he declared that he must marry Obiageli. The elders, shocked and angered, threatened to castrate him, but Ibeh boldly told them that even as a castrated man, he would still marry her. For his disrespect, he was punished, but he endured the punishment quietly. Yet his mind was unchanged. On Ori market day, Ibeh left his father's house and returned at sunset with Obiageli. He had committed a great abomination just to have her. In Obibi, it was forbidden for an unmarried man and woman to sleep under the same roof. But Ibeh, blinded by his desires, broke the law. Didi Anazi was deeply ashamed. He sent a message to the tribe of beauty, informing them of what had happened. But they sent word back, saying it was not their concern, it was his burden to bear. In Dikiri, there was no law, no shame, they cared for nothing. Fearing disgrace, and the loss of his title as leader of the Palm Wine Tappers Association, Didi Anazi had no choice but to marry Obiageli for Ibeh. That day marked the beginning of his son's destruction. After the marriage, he called Ibeh and said, "My son, be ready for the doom that follows an adulterous woman. The sin of such a woman never dies. Unless a person from such a cursed family turns to his ancestors and begs for help to live nobly, he will never have peace. He will never have a good wife or raise worthy children." But Ibeh did not listen. He had made his choice. Obiageli made a terrible mistake by lusting after the king's son, who was younger than her. It was considered a shameful act, and as punishment, she had to serve the elders of the community as a slave every market day. If a man's wife acted in such a disgraceful way, he would lose his title in the community. A man's strength and respect were seen in his wife's behavior. He would be seen as weak if his wife was disrespectful or immoral. Obiageli served the elders for weeks, and when her punishment was over, she was not allowed to associate with other women in the community. This made life difficult for her in the Obibi community. Her husband, Ibeh, was seen as the unluckiest man in the land. People used his family as an example of what not to do. In the sacred land of Obibi, the tribe of beauty was seen as flawed because of Obiageli's actions. People learned that while beauty might attract attention, it is character and values that truly keep people around. Out of all the women in the tribe of beauty, Obiageli was the only one who had a bride price paid for her. People wondered why the elders, who had made her serve as a slave, never gave in to her beauty or tempting appearance. The men of Obibi were noble, and they valued a woman's character, her ability to remain pure, and her decency. Obiageli did not possess these qualities. The men respected their ancestors and would not dishonor them for a woman who offered nothing but temporary pleasure. After serving her punishment, Obiageli became pregnant and gave birth to a female child, whom her husband named Olama. Later, she gave birth to a son, Okanta. However, things continued to worsen for Ibeh. 4.5 years after marrying Obiageli, he struggled to connect with his peers, had trouble selling palm wine and faced difficulties during the farming season. Other women warned their husbands to stay away from Ibeh, fearing that their husbands would be drawn to Obiageli's beauty, even though she lacked any real value. Ibeh became a sad man, as no one wanted to be associated with him, knowing he was married to such a woman. Ibeh had a friend named Adam Shinobi, who was also married. Their friendship was strong until Adimchi returned from a long journey and saw Obiageli. Everything changed for him. He had never seen a woman with such beauty and figure before. He got distracted by her heavy waist and full chest. While a woman's body changes after childbirth, the women of the tribe of beauty were blessed because they quickly regained their shape after giving birth. Adimchi couldn't control himself and complimented Ibeh on choosing such a beautiful woman. Adimchi had been away for years and had not been there when Ibeh married Obiageli. Things changed when Adimchi started visiting Ibeh's house more often, and Ibeh began to wonder why. One night, Adimchi told Ibeh he couldn't go home because he needed to check his trap deep in the night, and his own hut was too far from the bush where he had set it. This seemed strange to Ibeh, but out of friendship, he allowed him to stay, not knowing what was going on. Didi Anazi, Ibeh's father, couldn't stay quiet any longer. He warned Adimchi never to spend the night in his son's hut again. Meanwhile, Obiageli hated her father-in-law deeply because he had never supported her marriage to Ibeh and had always criticized her for her immoral and unfaithful behavior. One day, Ibeh returned from his farm, and his pregnant wife, Obiageli, served him onupus soup, bitter leaf soup. The next morning, he suddenly fell seriously ill. It was so bad that he was taken to an herbalist, but the herbalist told him he couldn't cure his sickness. After many visits to different herbalists, he was finally brought back home. Throughout all this, Ibeh never suspected that his wife might be the cause of his illness. He believed the gods were watching over him and that soon he would be healed. Months later, Obiageli gave birth to their last child, a baby girl. By this time, Ibeh was almost unable to move. The illness had dried his skin and made him very thin, yet no herbalist could cure him. Didi Anazi tried everything to help his son, but nothing worked. One day, while Ibeh was lying down, a friend of Didi Anazi came to him with an idea. He suggested that Ibeh should be taken to a certain place, and Didi Anazi agreed to go by sunrise the next day. That evening, during dinner, Obiageli made oha soup, which was her father-in-law's favorite dish. She knew he would never refuse it, even if it came from her. She made it with anu goat meat, just the way he liked it. When she brought it to his hut, she knelt before him and asked for forgiveness. She apologized for causing pain to his family and for bringing disgrace to them. As a sign of respect and to make peace, she told him that she had prepared the oha soup for him, pretending not to know it was his favorite. Didi Ibeh held Obiageli's hands and blessed her, and then she returned to her hut. At sunrise, Obiageli sent little Olama to check if her grandfather was still asleep. Olama went and returned, saying he was still asleep. At noon, Obiageli sent Olama again, and once more, she came back with the same answer. As the sun set, Obiageli went to check. That was when she discovered that his body was cold and he had passed away. The cause of Didi Anazi's death was never known. 17 years later, Olama, Okanta, and Azuka had all grown up, but they created chaos in the community. The king, however, was fair and made sure they were severely punished whenever they went against the traditions of the land. Ibeh had been ill for more than 20 years, and the only thing he could remember were the words his father had said when he first expressed his desire to marry a woman from the tribe of beauty. During this time, Obiageli secretly brought men from distant places into their home to satisfy her desires. As Ibeh's illness worsened, he became completely dependent on his wife. He relied on her for everything, bathing him, feeding him, cleaning him, and helping him with even his most basic needs. Olama was the image of her mother's beauty, and men prayed to their ancestors, hoping they would never meet her in a quiet place. It was easier for a goat to refuse a yam than for any man to see Olama and not be drawn to her curvy figure. Whenever the men of Obibi saw her, they quickly prayed to their ancestors, asking for strength to avoid falling for her charms or giving into temptation. Despite all this, Olama was known for her loose morals. Any man who desired her could easily have her. She became an object for sexual pleasure, and men didn't respect her because she could be bought with anything. Despite her striking beauty and tempting figure, Olama couldn't freely act on her desires with the men of Obibi. The men of Obibi still held to the belief that only women who respect themselves, cover their bodies properly, and were priceless deserved a bride price and respect. The laws of the land did not change because of her appearance. Olama would sneak out of Obibi at sunset to engage in immoral behavior at her maternal home, returning at sunrise. But one day, the unexpected happened. Olama discovered she was pregnant, and this was news no one in Obibi wanted to hear. Ibeh was not just disappointed. His heart was shattered, filled with deep regret. The one mistake he made by marrying for beauty had cost him everything precious to him, including his health. That Olama's mother called her aside at night and told her that she would stay in her hut until she gave birth, and only then would she be allowed outside. She couldn't bear the thought of seeing her daughter publicly humiliated and driven out of the village. From that day on, Olama was isolated, no longer allowed to see the light of day, while Obiageli was taking care of her pregnant daughter, making sure no one entered the hut uninvited. Okanta was causing trouble everywhere. Her only prayer was that he would not defile any woman, as the penalty for defilement was death. Months later, Olama gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The delivery was difficult because she wasn't allowed to cry out in labor to keep their secret hidden. She had to endure in silence. Her mother assisted her in giving birth, and after that, Olama was still not allowed to leave the hut until her body returned to normal in a few months. Obiageli welcomed her first grandchild, named Afamafuna, who had no father. He was the image of the gods, handsome and dark-skinned, and they wondered why he looked so special. He lived in a hut for 10 years, never allowed to cry, speak, or do anything without being told. His life was complicated and strictly controlled. 12 years later, Ibeh called Afamafuna to bless him. He told him that he was a special child and advised him to live as a respectable man in his new home, warning him not to let the sins of his maternal side influence him. He explained that lust was an enemy to men, and a man seeking peace must look beyond beauty and make wise choices. Afamafuna was not allowed to speak in response. Ibeh placed his hands on his head, blessing him again, and then said, "If you never see me again, remember this. Just as prey runs from its predators, you must avoid women if you ever sense them." In the dead of night, Okanta left the Obibi community with Afamafuna, traveling through the night to their new home in the Anaid community. Okanta stayed with him for a few days, teaching him how to cook and take care of himself before he left. Afamafuna had no choice but to adjust to his new life, and Okanta returned to Obibi. Afamafuna lived alone in the Anaid community, working hard to support himself. His family never visited, as they wanted to protect his secret and prevent any risk to his stay in Anaid. The people of Anaid believed his story when he told them that he was an orphan and had traced his lineage back to their land, where he had built the hut he lived in. For another 7 years, Afamafuna lived alone in Anaid. Every time he passed by groups of siblings playing together or fetching firewood or going to the stream, he wished he could experience those moments, but he knew it was not meant to be. He would often see young boys with their fathers and long for that connection, but he had none. He didn't know how much longer he could endure his lonely life, but he trusted the gods would bless him with a wife. The problem was, how could he marry without his kin to support him? As the years passed, Afamafuna grew into a handsome young man. He cooked, ate, and lived in solitude that Afimafuna's only companion was a wounded dog he found wandering in the bush. He felt sorry for the dog and took it home, treating it with care. Once the dog recovered and could walk properly, he named it I am, my friend. Having the dog around made life a little more bearable. Afimafuna treated the dog as if it were human, as it was the only living creature he could connect with, the only one that moved and had eyes, making him feel less alone. Every morning, he would secretly pray to his ancestors, hoping they would lighten his punishment for being born into the lineage of his grandfather, who had disobeyed the community and married from the tribe of Beauty. But would his ancestors show him mercy and answer his plea? One day, something unusual happened to Ibeh and Obibi. Obiageli was working in her backyard when she suddenly heard her husband cry out for help. She quickly rushed to see what was wrong, and what she saw shocked her. Ibeh's manhood had lost its strength like a withered plant. She asked him what had happened, and he told her that a strange wind had blown through, and he felt as though something had left him. Obiageli removed her clothes, but to her surprise, Ibeh's manhood did not respond as it usually did. Ibeh had always been lustful at the sight of her naked body, but now something was different. Despite his health issues, Ibeh still tried to satisfy Obiageli's desires, but when he stared at her naked body and found his manhood unresponsive, he knew something was truly wrong. For Obiageli, sexual satisfaction was everything. She would sing and glow when her desires were fulfilled, and now, with Ibeh unable to respond, she felt as though the very thing that kept her in the marriage was lost. She couldn't leave because of her children, but staying without her joy felt impossible. So, she decided to find a solution. Desperate, she traveled to a distant land to seek the help of a dwarf known for his ability to heal and return lost or weakened manhood. The dwarf was known for his work in restoring manhood. Obiageli took the risk and traveled day and night because the problem troubled her greatly. At last, she arrived at the hut of the spirit dwarf. People believed that the loss or weakness of manhood was connected to the gods. Only the gods could take it away, and the reason was often known only to the women the man had been with. The spirit dwarf asked Obiageli if she was truly prepared for the consequences of what she was asking for. Believing it was only about restoring her husband's manhood, she confidently assured him that she was ready. The spirit dwarf asked her again multiple times, and each time she firmly agreed. Finally, he handed her a jar and told her to swear by its contents that she would follow his instructions without changing her mind. Without hesitation, Obiageli took the oath. The spirit dwarf told her to return home, assuring her he would visit when the spirits were willing. 7 market days later, the spirit dwarf arrived at Ibeh's compound. He began by cleansing the surroundings and performing rituals to purify the land. After some time, he requested that Ibeh be brought outside. The spirit dwarf then went into the bush, cut fresh plantain leaves, and laid them on the ground. He built a small enclosure using palm fronds, creating a sacred space for the ritual. Next, he called for Ibeh's children to come forward. Okanta, Olama, and Azuka stepped out. If Obiageli had known what was about to happen, she would have fled. With Ibeh's children standing before him, the spirit dwarf delivered the message from the spirits. Only a drop of blood from Ibeh's child could appease the spirit that had taken his manhood. Ibeh was pleased, believing that the solution was simple and within reach. However, Obiageli was troubled by the demand, yet she was powerless to resist, having already sworn an oath at the spirit dwarf's hut. Olama was instructed to dip her palm into the sacred pot. If she truly belonged to Ibeh, a drop of blood would fall into the pot once she withdrew her hand, and Ibeh's manhood would be restored. She obeyed, submerging her palm into the pot, but when she pulled it out, her hand remained unmarked. No blood had fallen. Ibeh was surprised, unable to accept what had just happened. He pleaded with the spirit dwarf to allow a second attempt, but the dwarf rebuked him, declaring that the spirits he served were neither blind nor foolish. Ibeh still held on to hope, believing that the solution was not lost since Okanta and Azuka had yet to dip their palms into the sacred pot. The spirit dwarf was not a man who could be bribed. Perhaps Obiageli would have tried, but it was impossible because of the oath. Okanta stepped forward and placed his palm into the sacred pot, but when he pulled it out, there was still no drop of blood. It is said that men do not cry, but only weep in silence. However, on this day Ibeh cried out so loud, his cries filling the air and drawing people to his compound. One by one, they arrived until a large crowd had gathered to witness the downfall of a stubborn man. Deep inside, Ibeh still clung to the hope that the gods would show him mercy, allowing at least his last child to be truly his. But when Azuka placed her palm into the sacred pot, the spirit dwarf suddenly shouted, commanding her to remove it. The spirits had rejected her, sensing that someone who shared her blood was present among them, and they could feel the deceit. From where he lay, Ibeh spoke, claiming that the spirits were right. He was her father. But the spirit dwarf shook his head and declared that if she were truly his daughter, the spirits would not have rejected her while she attempted to take part in the ritual meant to heal him. The crowd watched in silence as an old man, broken and childless, shed bitter tears. His entire life had been built on deception. Everyone had betrayed him. Then, with a heavy heart, he raised a question. If the gods had rejected Azuka because her true father was among them, then who was her father? As soon as the truth was revealed, Adimchi attempted to flee from the crowd, but the great spirit dwarf struck him down. He collapsed to the ground, his legs rendered useless. The spirit dwarf then turned to the gathering and declared that when Azuka dipped her palms into the sacred pot, the gods traced her, not to Ibeh but to Adimchi. This could only mean one thing: they share the same blood. Adimchi could no longer deny it. Filled with guilt, he fell to his knees, begging Ibeh for forgiveness. He admitted that he had secretly lusted after Obiageli and had often crept into Ibeh's hut whenever he was away. But the spirit dwarf laid a heavy curse upon Adimchi, declaring that the spirit of lust would never depart from him and his generation. From that day forward, the curse was passed down through generations, and what people call rape in today's world still lingers in his generation. Adimchi had not only betrayed his closest friend, but he had also broken the bond they shared and broken the laws of the land. His crime was reported to the king, who, after judgment, banished him from the land. From that day on, Adimchi became a wanderer, forever carrying the weight of his sins. The spirit dwarf turned to Obiageli and spoke, revealing that her husband's troubles began when she used money from her lover to prepare a meal for him. The spirit of purity, in its anger, struck him with illness. He could have healed slightly, but there was no way for his recovery to be complete while his wife continued in her adulterous ways. It worsened when she met Adimchi and began bringing him, along with other men, into their marital bed. Ibeh, however, blamed no one but himself. His father had warned him, and the elders had often reminded him of the old wisdom passed down by their ancestors about the dangers of marrying a beautiful wife. Ibeh didn't just marry a beautiful woman, he married a wayward one, and not just any woman, but one from the tribe of beauty, a tribe that was nearly forbidden to marry from. He lifted his head and asked the spirit dwarf if there was no other way to heal him. The spirit dwarf replied, explaining that his ancestors were not unaware of the deceit in his household, but they wanted to reveal to him a truth that had been hidden for years. The spirit dwarf further added that the fact the spirits knew he had no child of his own, yet insisted only such blood could be used, meant that his ancestors were punishing him for disobeying their warnings and bringing misfortune upon their lineage. The spirit dwarf continued, explaining that they were also punishing Ibeh for his role in his father's death. As the saying goes, a child who disobeys its elders will never go unpunished. Ibeh was confused. He had loved his father dearly and still mourned his untimely death, which had come without any sign of illness. He asked the dwarf how he was responsible for his father's death. The spirit dwarf told him to ask the woman he had married, despite all the warnings. Ibeh, in his anger, reached down, scooped up some sand, and threw it at his wife, cursing her with a vow that if she didn't change, he would call upon his ancestors to strike her dead. Tears filled Obiageli's eyes as she explained that when Ibeh had recently fallen ill, she overheard her father-in-law telling a friend that he intended to take Ibeh to the hut of purity. Fearing the hut would reveal her secrets, she devised a plan. She prepared Ibeh's favorite soup, adding the substance that Adimchi had given her. This was how she silenced Didi Anazi forever. In response, the spirit dwarf laid a curse upon her and summoned the spirit of lust to possess her. Everyone shouted in shock when they realized Ibeh had been living with his enemy all these years. He cried and begged his ancestors to forgive him for disrespecting them in the land. Olama and Okanta pulled their mother and asked her who their father was. She cried and told them she didn't know who their father was. She explained that even if she could find Okanta's father, she might never be able to find Olama's father because she was still involved with other men when Ibeh married her. The villagers who were there dragged her to the king's palace. After a fair hearing, the king ordered that she dance to the drum of shame. Once she finished dancing, the king gave his judgment, which was also part of their tradition. The elders cursed her, declaring that as long as she lived, the spirit of lust would never leave her. The villagers responded, "I see. It shall be so." The king then banished her from the community, never to return. As Ibeh lay on the plantain leaf, he heard the drum of shame. He knew it was for his wife. While she danced, people swept her footsteps with brooms as they passed by her husband's compound. Ibeh remembered when he was 23 and first saw Obiageli. Her large waist confused him and made him ignore the truth. He thought back to how he lost his friends, his title, his honor, his dignity, and his pride as a man, all for her beautiful face and body. He turned away and cried deeply, asking his ancestors to place the spirit of lust upon her. The villagers reached the boundary and swept Obiageli away like dust. Shamefully, she walked to the Ndakiri community, but by the time she got there, news had spread that she had killed her father-in-law. The few remaining family members rejected her, knowing that people would feel threatened by her presence because her hands were stained with blood. It was believed that those who had blood on their hands would die in the same way they had killed others. People avoided her to ensure they wouldn't become victims themselves. She only had one place to go. In the dead of night, she fled from Ndakiri to Anaid, the only place she hoped would offer her refuge. She walked through the night, and before dawn, she reached Anaid. Her grandson was surprised to see her, but she couldn't explain why she had come. Afam, though confused, was happy to finally have someone to stay with him, eat with him, and talk to him. Little did he know that his grandmother's arrival would bring doom. Afam didn't just rely on the farmland attached to his hut. He also raised livestock. As a young man, he was comfortable, but the fact remained that he was the grandson of Ibeh, and every word spoken about his lineage lingered around him. 7 market days after Obiageli was cast out of Obibi, her husband was struck dead by the spirit of purity. Only the spirit of purity had the power to kill a man and remove his tongue as proof. His body wasn't allowed to be buried until it had been left in the hut of purity for 7 days before being taken for a proper burial. Okanta, Olama, and Azuka couldn't go to inform their mother of their father's death because they didn't know where she was. The events in Ibeh's family did nothing to change the immoral behavior of his children. They continued down the same path. One day, as Afam was bathing in his compound, the sun was almost setting, and darkness began to fall. The bamboo hedge surrounding the compound had grown so thick that no one could see inside from the outside. Afam, feeling comfortable after a long day in the fields, stripped off his clothes and enjoyed his warm bath. His grandmother came out of the hut and saw him. It was as if she had never noticed how handsome he was before, and she suddenly found herself attracted to him. Her body began to itch uncontrollably, and she lost all sense of control. Despite her old age, she still had a large backside. She undressed and walked toward Afam. Though Afam had never seen a woman's nakedness before, he instinctively knew that being with his grandmother in such a way was an abomination. When Afam saw his grandmother's nakedness, he immediately fell to the ground, praying to his ancestors to forgive him for seeing something he should not have. But his grandmother did not leave. She begged him to be with her, saying she had loved him since he was a boy. Afam stayed on the ground, his face pressed to the earth, asking his ancestors to take away the temptation. But his grandmother stood there, not moving. Afam finally got up, washed his face, and ran to his hut, still shocked by what had happened. Soon after, his grandmother came to his hut and stood at the entrance. Afam's grandmother told him that whether he liked it or not, he would have to fulfill her desires, or she would shout for everyone to hear. The last thing Afam wanted was for people to discover who he truly was. He refused her at first, but she threatened to return to Obibi and tell everyone that he was a fatherless child born out of wedlock. Afam didn't know that she had been cast out of the community and couldn't return, and he didn't want to risk his mother's safety. Reluctantly, he gave in and lay with his grandmother. What he thought would be a one-time event soon became a regular part of his life. He would satisfy her desires throughout the night, at dawn, sunrise, and sunset. Afam's compound remained private since he had no friends and no one visited him, and it was well secured. After work, he would return to find his grandmother and AK Poundy outside his hut, and without hesitation, he would drop his tools and lay with her. One day, Afam, frustrated by his grandmother's constant lustful behavior, decided to leave the house. She had become a major distraction, and he had no time to tend to his livestock or even check on his farm. He ran to his farm only to find that weeds were taking over and his animals were not doing well. He couldn't bring himself to return home, so he walked past his farm and sat under a tree. He must have fallen asleep because the sound of a girl's cry woke him up. He stood, confused, thinking someone might be about to attack him, but there was no one around. As he walked down, the girl's cry grew louder and louder. From the top of the hill, he saw people gathering yams. Afam realized he had never ventured this far before. Aside from going to the market to sell his produce, he either stayed home with his dog or worked on the farm. His grandmother's actions had driven him away, and he could no longer find peace at home. Afam sat down and watched the people working on the hillside. Suddenly, a man came down the hill with a boy and a girl who seemed to be his children. On that day, Afam saw the most beautiful person he had ever laid eyes on. As she walked past him, he felt a strange pull in his body, as if he had been waiting for her. They didn't speak. He simply greeted the man, who he assumed was her father, and the man responded. The girl just waved at him. Afam quietly followed them, wanting to know where they lived. His curiosity led him to a large compound. It was far from his hut, but he was determined to return and see such beauty again. Afam returned home to find that his grandmother had surprisingly cooked egusi soup with pounded yam for him. He was shocked, as she had never really cooked or taken care of him since she moved in. Afam ate and enjoyed the meal, but that night his grandmother wouldn't let him rest. Despite his efforts, he couldn't satisfy her desires. Afam was frustrated. He ran out into the night, seeking a quiet spot to sit and think. He eventually dozed off, and the chirping of birds woke him up. After sitting for a while, he remembered having a dream. He thanked his ancestors for revealing the dream to him, then cried out, questioning why they had allowed such a thing to happen. After thinking things through, Afam prepared himself for what was to come. Determined, he went back home, picked up his tools, and went to his farm. Before sunset, Afam washed his hands and feet with the last of the water in his drinking jar and set off to find the beautiful young woman's home. When he arrived, he saw people packing yams, picking out wrappers, and doing other chores. He waited until sunset, but he didn't see the woman. Disappointed, he walked home. Afam kept going back after working on the farm, but he never met her. He decided to try going there at sunrise, but still, she wasn't there. After many failed attempts, Afam decided to spend the night away from his grandmother. Instead of going home, he slept in his livestock hut and prayed to his ancestors to cleanse him of the wrongs he had done. He asked them to lift the curses placed on his family by the gods and to help him win the heart of the beautiful woman. Would the gods answer his prayers? Afam prayed to the gods all night. The next morning, as he made his way home, he remembered the spot where he first saw the young woman and decided to check again. To his surprise, he found her there with the same young man she had been with the first time. When she saw Afam, she smiled and told him she had been waiting for him. Nwakigo was the daughter of the wealthiest farmer in Anaid. He owned 5 yam barns, large farmlands, and a big hut where he sold all kinds of wrappers. People from all over came to buy from him, and the gods had blessed him greatly. Getting to know Ego wasn't hard, because her love for Afam was stronger than his love for her, though he didn't realize it at first. Since the gods had answered his prayer by bringing her to him, he believed they had also answered the other ones. That day, Ego told him how she had been climbing down the hill every sunset to wait for him at the spot where they first met, but he never showed up. Afam laughed and told her that, at the same time, he had been sneaking to her father's compound to wait for her, too. They both laughed at the coincidence. Afam returned home feeling like the happiest man on earth, only to find his grandmother waiting for him, naked, expecting him to give in to her desires. His dog lay on the ground, looking at him. Afam could tell that the dog was not happy with him. He took a step back, wondering if he had forgotten to mention her behavior to the gods. Fearing that others might see her exposed, he quickly ran outside, and his grandmother followed him. He respectfully asked her to return to his hut, promising he would do as she wished. Meanwhile, his relationship with Nwakigo had begun, but it wasn't the fairy tale he had hoped for. It felt as if all the feelings he once had for her had disappeared. Afam prayed to the gods to make him feel like a man when he was with Ego, but nothing changed. 2 years into their relationship, Ego called him one day, asking why he had never invited her to his hut, and why he hadn't asked for her hand in marriage. Afam didn't know how to tell Ego the truth. He didn't want to lose her, but he knew he wasn't ready to do what was necessary. Ego, who had come to love him completely, continued pressing him, but for Afam, his feelings had changed. He was conflicted and confused. So one day, he gathered the courage to call Ego and end their relationship. She was heartbroken, pleading with him to explain why he was ending things, but Afam couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. Ego begged him, even threatening to take her life, but Afam was too overwhelmed with guilt over the forbidden relationship he had with his grandmother. The weight of his actions had taken a toll on him, and he was too far gone to go back. Afam returned to his hut that night and told his grandmother firmly to never come near him again. He lay awake, unable to sleep, consumed with the words he had said to Ego and the way she had pleaded for him not to leave. He wept, regretting his actions and wishing he had come from a noble family, one that taught moral values. The thought of asking for Ego's hand in marriage, knowing the risks of his true identity being uncovered, tormented him. He felt that no responsible man would ever give his daughter to a man without a father. On one faithful Eek market day, Afam packed his farm produce and went to the market. His grandmother had promised to make a goosey soup for him when he returned, and he couldn't stop thinking about it while he was there. He even bought her a new wrapper as a gift. But when he got back home, he found his grandmother lying lifeless, a knife stuck in her stomach. He stepped back, shocked and confused. He couldn't understand who could have killed her. She couldn't have taken her own life, especially since there hadn't been any argument or fight. Afam knelt down, heartbroken, and cried out to the gods. He begged them not to abandon him, but to have mercy and help him find the person who had killed his grandmother. Afam left his grandmother's lifeless body in the hut, and as the sun began to set, he traveled to his grandfather's house to share the sad news. When he arrived, he couldn't find his grandfather or his mother, only the sister of his mother, Azuka. She barely recognized him at first, but then she welcomed him in and gave him food to eat. After eating, Afam asked about the brother of his mother, Okanta, and Azuka told him what had happened in Obibi. He explained how Okanta had caused a lot of trouble in the community, and one day, he lured after 5 young maidens who had gone into the bush to gather firewood. Okanta tied them up and defiled them one by one until he grew tired, then left them unconscious in the bush. The parents of the missing maidens waited until sunset, but when they didn't return, they reported the matter to the king. The king sent the youth to search for them, and they were found in the bush, unconscious and tied up. The girls named Okanta as the one who harmed them, and he was quickly caught. The king didn't hesitate with his judgment, as everyone knew the punishment for such a crime was death. Okanta was castrated and left in the open for the gods to take his life. Anyone who harms a woman in such a way is left to die in the open, as the spirit takes the life of those who commit such acts. Afam didn't ask about his mother because he suspected she had done something wrong. Azuka then told him that his mother, Olama, had become pregnant and followed the man who got her pregnant to his hut in the Ndakiri community. Azuka explained how her mother, Obiageli, was sent away from the village after what happened, and no one had seen her since. With tears in his eyes, Afam broke the tragic news to Azuka that her mother had been murdered the night before in his hut. Azuka was devastated. She told Afam that she had been searching for her mother everywhere, but never imagined she could have been with Afam. She cried uncontrollably, unable to shed another tear. Azuka then told Afam to secretly bury her mother at night, as her body couldn't be accepted in Obibi. Afam considered the idea Azuka suggested. As he was leaving the compound, he spotted a knife, one that seemed familiar. He tried to recall where he had seen it before. He picked up the knife and took it with him back to Anaid, making sure no one saw him. When he arrived home, he looked at his grandmother's lifeless body. Azuka's words echoed in his mind. It saddened him that, out of all the people his grandmother knew, she had chosen to come to his hut after being cast out of the Obibi community. Afam spent the whole morning thinking about what to do next, and how to dig a grave to bury her. As he stood up to prepare, he noticed the knife that had been lodged in his grandmother's stomach. He had taken it out the day she was stabbed, and had placed it not far from where she lay. But something about it felt strange. The knife that had been used on his grandmother wasn't from his household. As he looked at it, he remembered the knife he had seen when he visited Azuka in Obibi. He pulled out the second knife from his bag, and to his shock it was the same. He was confused. How could an unknown person have entered his hut and committed such a crime, using a knife that didn't belong to him? It simply means the person's mission was just to kill her. Hence, the culprit came with a knife. Why did he find the same type of knife in his grandmother's house when he went to report her death? Could the killer be from Obibi? And if so, who? Who could have traveled so far to do such a thing? At first, he thought it was a coincidence. He suspected Ego, but she didn't know where he lived. As he prepared to dig his grandmother's grave, his mind was troubled. He feared that the person who had killed her might come after him, too. He dropped his tools and set out to find Nwakigo. He saw her on the hillside, and as he approached, she spoke first. She asked if he had come to see her because his grandmother was finally gone. For a moment, Afam felt a cold. He asked her if she had visited him, and she boldly said no. But Afam had never taken her to his home, so how could she possibly know where he lived? It seemed impossible for her to know that his grandmother had died unless she was the one who did it. Afam didn't waste time. It felt as if the gods guided him to leave his tools behind and go to Ego, where he finally uncovered the truth. He confronted her, asking if she killed his grandmother out of jealousy. After all, he refused to marry her out of hatred because he broke her heart. They argued, and soon Ego's brother, Obibi, came down from the hill to ask why Afam was fighting with his sister. Afam explained that, based on everything he had discovered in Ego's own words, it seemed she was the one who killed his grandmother. He had never taken her to his house, never told her about his grandmother's death, yet somehow she knew everything, which meant she must have been the one behind it. Obibi was speechless. The evidence against her was clear. He turned to his sister. A fight broke out between them, and the servants working on the hill came down to separate them. They were taken to Ease, Nwakigo's father, where Afam explained his reason for accusing her. It was clear that Ego was the one responsible, but her father, eager to protect her, had Afam thrown into his hut of detention. This was a place where he kept people who owed him money, those who had stolen from him, or servants who offended him. Afam spent days in detention, crying and praying to his ancestors for his innocence and hoping to be freed, so he could bury his grandmother. Every day, he prayed, and one day, a servant who was responsible for sweeping the hut of the detention yard overheard him. She noticed that each morning, Afam would pray to his ancestors for his release. Word had spread about his accusation against Ease's daughter for the murder of his grandmother. The servant then remembered her late husband. The servant had no power to intervene, but she knew Afam was innocent. In desperation, she ran to the tree of justice and cried out, pleading that once again, Ease had wronged an innocent person. She recalled how her husband had died in the same hut of detention after being falsely accused of setting Ibeh's yam barn on fire. She had been forced to work as a servant to pay for the damage. The servant begged the tree of justice, asking for help, as another innocent life was about to be lost due to the abuse of power. There was once a powerful and wicked man named Okwut, feared for taking lives without reason. 4 years, he committed terrible crimes, and the people cried out to their gods for justice, but the gods remained silent. One day, Okwut killed a newborn baby, and the grieving mother wept bitterly, pleading with the gods for vengeance. When they did not answer, she ran to a great tree, whose only known purpose was to provide shade from the sun. Standing beneath its branches, she made a vow. As long as the tree remained fresh and alive, she would not leave until the gods avenged her innocent child. For 7 days, she stayed beneath the tree, crying and calling upon the gods for justice. On the 3rd day, the gods answered her prayers and struck Okwut dead. From that day on, the tree became sacred. Many others came to seek justice beneath its shade, and the gods always listened. This tradition was passed down through generations. The servant, believing in the power of the tree of justice, spent a night there, praying earnestly. She pleaded that if justice had been denied to her husband in the past, it should be granted now for the innocent Ifam. At dawn, she rose from the sacred ground, declaring that she would wait for the gods to respond. Ifam spent another night in detention, but at dawn, the servant came and set him free. He was taken to Ibeh's hut, where he was shocked to see some elders along with a familiar face. He wondered how they had managed to find him and what their purpose was. The elders introduced themselves as the elders of Anaid. They explained that they had received a divine revelation that an innocent young man was being held in detention because of a woman from Obibi. Following the guidance of the revelation, they traveled to Obibi, found the woman, and brought her to Ibeh's compound for judgment. Everyone took their seats, and Ifam was asked to state his name, which he did. Then, he was asked if he recognized the woman they had brought with them. Ifam was shocked that the woman the elders had brought was the sister of his mother, Azuka. One of the elders then spoke, declaring that they had come to ensure that justice was served. Azuka fell to the ground, weeping as she begged Ifam for forgiveness. She confessed that after losing Okanta and seeing her sister, Olama, leave to live with an old man, she was left alone. No man wanted to marry her because of the shame her mother had brought upon their family. 4 days, she asked people in Obibi about her mother's whereabouts, but they all claimed not to know. Left with no other option, and overwhelmed by loneliness, she decided to move in with Ifam. However, when she arrived at his hut, she was met with a sight that annoyed her. Ifam was on top of his grandmother, satisfying his desires. Azuka could not believe that after destroying their lives, their grandmother also wanted to ruin Ifam's future. Determined to put an end to her evil deeds, Azuka returned to Obibi and prepared herself to commit the act. On the fateful day, she sneaked into Ifam's hut and took her mother's life. However, just as she was about to flee, someone saw her. Fearing that she would be caught, Azuka ran away in haste, leaving behind the knife she had used. As she confessed, Ifam could not hold back his tears. He questioned why everything had turned out this way, but there were no answers. Meanwhile, one of the servants ran to inform Ego that the real culprit had been found. When Ego arrived, she was shocked to recognize Azuka. After days of heartbreak, Ego had secretly followed Ifam to his farm and then trailed him home without his knowledge. She had hoped to meet his grandmother and beg her to convince Ifam to marry her. However, instead of finding a listening ear, she walked into the tragedy that had changed everything. It now became clear how Ego knew about Ifam's grandmother's death. People wondered why she had kept such vital information to herself. However, they failed to understand that witnessing a crime often brings the same fear as being accused of committing it. As long as the true culprit remained unknown, she would always feel tied to the crime. Azuka turned to Ifam and told him to seek his ancestors' forgiveness. She believed that he had unknowingly become a victim, and a tool used to fulfill the curses placed upon his grandmother. She was burdened with a spirit of lust, and fate chose Ifam to be entangled in her curse. In the end, Azuka was taken back to Obibi to face her punishment. Meanwhile, Ifam found peace with Ego, and the devoted servant who had prayed at the tree of justice rejoiced, knowing that the gods had answered her pleas. Afam finally came back home after all the trail. As soon as he entered the compound, his loyal dog saw him from afar and ran toward him, barking happily. The dog jumped around him, wagging its tail in excitement. Afam knelt down and hugged his only true friend, stroking its fur while laughing. The way the dog moved around him, licking his hands and whining, showed how much it had missed him. People say that a dog is a man's best friend, and Afam now understood why. His heart was full of gratitude. After everything he had been through, this dog had stayed loyal, waiting for him to return. As he walked toward his hut with the dog by his side, he thought about his trails and the people that had betrayed him, and he realized that a dog's love was true and never changing. That night, as Afam sat outside under the moonlight, the dog lay beside him, resting its head on his feet. He smiled, knowing that no matter what happened next, he would never be alone. As a sign of goodwill, Ease rewarded Afam and freely gave Ego to him as his wife. With a heart full of gratitude, Afam laid his grandmother's remains to rest. Determined to cleanse his lineage of past misfortunes, he set aside a sacred day to honor his ancestors and beseech them to lift the curses that had plagued his bloodline. Afam thought about the dream he had on the day he prayed to his ancestors. In the dream, they told him that he would be given a second chance at life, a good wife, wealth, and a peaceful future. But they also warned him that before he could enjoy these blessings, he would have to go through many trials, obstacles, and challenges. Now, as he sat in his compound, he realized that everything they had said had come true. Life had tested him in ways he never imagined. He had faced betrayal, pain, and loss, but he had also found love, wisdom, and strength along the way. Through every hardship, he had held on to the hope that better days would come, and now he could finally see the light at the end of the dark tunnel. From that moment on, Afam lived a noble life. His marriage with Ego became fruitful, and they were blessed with 2 children who took after his father. These children, known for their uprightness, won the love and admiration of the people of Anaid. In the end, Afam was grateful, for his ancestors had heard his prayers, granting him a family of honor and respect. When choosing a life partner, one must look beyond mere beauty. In today's world, many believe that it is a woman's character, not her appearance, that sustains a marriage. Any man who aspires to success must do all he can to rid himself of the spirit of lust. Today, as we have seen in the tale, Ibeh ignored the wisdom of his father, the elders, and his ancestors, allowing himself to be ensnared by lust and the trap of beauty. This single mistake led to the downfall of his father and the destruction of his entire lineage. You can always rise above your troubles. Afam was born out of wedlock, which was seen as a great sin in his community. To make things worse, he had no father, and at a very young age, he was forced to live alone. But Afam never gave up. He strongly believed in his ancestors, prayed to them, and stayed hopeful that he could change the fate of his cursed family. Life was not easy for him, but he refused to let his hardships defeat him. In life, always strive to stand out. Afam faced many struggles, but he never lost hope. He was determined to make a difference, and in the end, his ancestors helped him succeed. As we journey through life, we must pray that the sins of our fathers do not follow us, for there are times when we find ourselves trapped in difficult situations, wondering how we got there. Innocent Afam unknowingly became a victim of the curses placed upon his grandmother. If it were in today's world, he would have carried the burden of that stigma for the rest of his life. Therefore, let us pray that the sins of our ancestors perish with them and never find their way to us. Life is full of unfortunate circumstances. Nwakigo could have been wrongfully executed for a crime she did not commit, all because of a simple statement she made. It was only her father's influence that saved her. But the real question remains, what if it had happened to someone without a voice, someone with no one to fight for them? As we go about our daily lives, may we never be found guilty of crimes we did not commit.